Okay, so it's begun. Before I begin, I'd just like to mention a couple of things. Firstly, I think that this book is written with excellent foresight. The current circumstances of the world we're living in really bring into picture the relevance of this text, and especially being so as more and more things develop. I keep spotting different comparisons and different areas where this text can actually be applied given the crisis we are facing. After reading the work of Diane and Michelle, I've also noticed that the chapters are more interlinked than I previously thought. And of course, when you think about our future selves, states, and cyber terrorism, of course, this has to do with everything that is human. And at the end of the day, we are all connected. So, of course, there are always going to be interlinkages between the subjects. But moving on to the future of states, which is chapter 3 of the book by Cohen and Schmidt. It's just a little bit of the table of contents, very basic overview of what we'll be going through here today together. We'll start with describing what is a state. As we all know, a state is a nation or a country that is organized underneath a government and made up of citizens, such as Malta, such as Germany, and the United States, European Union might be moving to a state, but it's not exactly a state yet. The internet, as we know, is a network of network. It's described as being decentralized and is designed to transmit information. When the internet came about, it was always known as the information superhighway because you could be transmitting, in those days, text was being transmitted across the world. That was amazing. Now, as we know, movies, documentaries, and this lecture are being transmitted through the internet with ease. As well, of course, we've been hearing stories about e-learning happening in schools. That's of course only possible because of the internet, and it's extraordinary how that's actually happening. I saw Sandra actually posted something to her Facebook profile where she was mentioning, what if this COVID crisis was happening in 2005? The world would be a very different place. Back in 2005, Facebook was only just coming onto the scene. It was still a college tool. YouTube was not invented yet, or not functioning yet. And it would be quite a different world, being locked in your home and not being able to continue working if it was 2005. But then again, I think in 2005, we had less globalization, even though we were already quite globalized. So maybe the spread would have been less dramatic. The internet is described as a lawless space, and an important thing that we will be speaking about today is how control of the internet, such as censorship, has the power to really sway opinion. The government is described as a gatekeeper to the internet, even though it is decentralized, even though it is lawless, simply because the mechanics of the internet, the hardware, the infrastructure, they are required for the internet today to exist. Even though sometimes it feels like the internet is abstract, it does have physical beings of servers and transmission towers and routers. These are all spaces where the data and the information is being transmitted through, from, towards, out. This is the mechanics, the guts of the internet, the piping, the sewer system of the internet. These are where the good government can maintain control and can invest in, can shut off, block, or decide to keep free. This control allows the government to empower its citizens by giving it full access. It allows its government to also disempower citizens through this control of information. We'll see a bit what kind of different levels of control different governments go to. But first, we'll just go through a couple points here that stuck out in the introduction of chapter 3, where we're currently experiencing a rat race. A rat race is a competition, or who gets there first for cybersecurity, for influence and digital dominance. These are the important factors of future states that today our governments are trying to become the leading, to have that cutting edge in these aspects. As we do already today, alliances, friendships, enemies will be forming and have formed. Some of them will be historic alliances, some of them will be new alliances. For example, on an EU level, Malta falls very much in line with countries like Cyprus, like Luxembourg, because we have similar desires, being small countries, taking advantage of the world in our own unique way. Just as other nations, like the Nordic countries, have their own alliance of the North for their own reasons. And just as Western countries in the EU have their alliances, so will autocracies, dictatorships have their own alliances. And we see this where China invests in infrastructure for North Korea. There's a big competition happening in Africa, but that's a story for later. Next, we'll talk about the balkanization of the internet. It's a big word, but put very simply, balkanization means siloing. So you have different forms of the internet are accessible to different people. To put it, in a simplistic way, and in a way that's not negative. When you go on Google search, if you do a Google search from .com.mt, you're going to see websites that are more geared to Malta. So you search supermarket on google.com.mt, you're going to get green supermarkets, you're going to get Parma supermarket in Malta. Whilst if you search on google.co.uk and you search supermarket, you get Tesco and Asda. That's one form of balkanization, but balkanization that we'll talk about here is different levels of censorship. China very openly censors their internet. It's a blatant censorship, and they do it to subvert the population. They hide Tiananmen Square, they hide information about the Dalai Lama and other sorts of things. Whilst countries like Turkey, they do it in a more sheepish approach, which is they won't tell you about it, but they will do it. However, if the population does discover that this has happened, they will oblige to the outcry from the population not to do it. This happened in Turkey's history, in its recent history, and the population was successful at not allowing the government to censor certain information. In Western countries like the United States, like the EU, we like to think that what we censor is politically and culturally acceptable. For the most part, it is. Censored websites include things like child pornography, things that are too gruesome or censored, amongst others. And that's it. The internet as we know of today is not completely balkanized, but there are risks of it continuing to be more and more balkanized. And we just hope that countries that have not experienced the internet yet have a chance the population has a chance to know what a free internet is really like. Because once somebody's born into a censored world, they're not going to know what the difference is. This is a statement coming from the Chinese government on their form of censorship. Laws and regulations clearly prohibit the spread of information that contains content subverting state power, undermining national unity, or infringing upon national honor and interests. Basically, what they're saying is, yes, we will censor anything that puts our authority at risk. That's the equivalent of a government shutting down a political journalist. That's basically what they're saying here. Virtual asylum and walled gardens, they're two interesting concepts. Virtual asylum is described as people who are inside of China might want to access the free internet, so they might be seeking virtual asylum in countries that have a free internet. And today, people migrate for economic reasons, for many reasons, and people might actually be migrating in the future to access free internet. In the book, it also describes as virtual asylum as also being the first step to achieving asylum in a country and verifying your identity before you actually gain physical asylum. So could be different approaches and different versions of it that we see play out in the future. Whilst walled gardens basically describe the concept of balkanization to an extreme level. China is known for the Great Wall, and today it's also known for the Great Firewall. So we hope that these kind of walled gardens do not continue to exist and to become worse. We know on social media about echo chamber effects. If you were inside a walled garden, you can imagine an echo chamber effect, but to an even higher degree, meaning that the only information you are hearing is that the government wants you to hear. So of course you are going to believe or perceive the world with the information you have available. Virtual multilateralism. When we talk about a unilateral approach, that means countries acting on its own. When we talk about a multilateral approach, that means the countries acting together with a group of other nations. This is one example that was brought up in the book. An autocratic cyber union will be one between autocratic countries like China and Egypt and North Korea. What would they be doing in this union? Basically sharing best practices about how to control their population through censorship, monitoring, and any other technologies. This also happens in the United Arab Emirates. They've banned WhatsApp and other messenger tools and only allow for Talk, not TikTok, Talk, which actually has a digital backdoor that allows them to see everything that the people are saying and without any privacy. Other technologies include deep fakes, which can create a version of me speaking that you would think is me, but is not actually me. And of course, the motivation for this to happen would be to share the technology and the tactics that are used in different autocratic countries to maintain control and some fares the population. Interestingly, this is also happening in Western countries. I've personally taken an interest in the Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions. They're made up of mostly Nordic countries, but not just Nordic countries. The focus is there for the moment. What they are doing is creating bridges to allow for different data silos in different countries to communicate with each other, to exchange data, tax information, health information, travel information. This is creating the infrastructure that's needed for a digital single market to happen in the EU, but of course they're already doing it there. They're allowing cross-border cooperation and it's to happen in a secure way. Of course, you can see the values that the different cyber unions hold are very different. In this case, the values are focused on openness, transparency, and responsibility. Cyber war is a big part of the future that states will partake in. Cyber war has many forms. 3 forms could be disinformation that we have experienced before, maybe the Trump campaigns, harassment, which could be a number of things. It could be threats, that keep people off the internet and maybe subdue them from actually speaking out openly on the internet, as well as espionage, which we have known for and has been a part of war for a long time. We're seeing new forms of it in this digital world. There's a couple of different weapons that are used in cyber war. We'll mention just a few for this information. We've seen that memes are a very powerful tool to spread disinformation and fake news. DDoS attacks, which is basically when hackers are taking control of multiple different computers and using this hundreds or thousands of computers to flood websites and basically crash the servers, making the websites inaccessible by anyone who actually needs to use the website. In DDoS attacks, you could have a network of a company or a university or a school which has 200 computers. If one of them could be hacked, the whole network is basically at risk and can be used to perform DDoS attacks. We'll talk later about how we can change this imbalance. And the Stuxnet and Flame virus, two very famous viruses that were co-created by the United States and Israel. It was not easy to find out that they did it. There were even some false flags in the coding that made you think it was them when it wasn't them. But the Stuxnet was designed to basically take control of a nuclear power plant, cause disruption in the system, which caused it to malfunction and be damaged, which could result in huge catastrophes when you think about it. A huge catastrophe could happen with a virus like Stuxnet, causing a reactor to melt down. Similar things like Chernobyl might happen, similar things like Fukushima might happen, all because of a couple million lines of code. Flame was also a similar virus, just very different use. The use of Flame was to remain covert and to continually extract and send information, intel, back to the recipients abroad. So these cyber attacks, they're quite substantial in my opinion. I'd be quite angry if somebody attacked me in that way. As angry as I would be if they punched me in the face. To be quite frank with you, if you are spying on what I do online or stealing my information or causing my air conditioner to explode with a virus, I'd be as angry as if you hit me. So, when is a cyber attack an act of war? Very often, countries are at cyber war with each other today, right now, yet we're not fighting physically. We're still trading, we're still going on holiday to these other countries, but we're at cyber war with these countries without even knowing. Liability is very difficult to prove in cyber war, and this could be a reason why. But of course, there are other interests of nations as well. One way that we can start to defend ourselves better is to create more of an asymmetry. As mentioned before, DDoS attacks, if you have 200 computers in the same network and you hack one of them, that leaves the other 200 computers very vulnerable. Creating asymmetry would mean that by hacking one computer doesn't necessarily mean you can hack the one next attached to it, connected to it. And we can do this with cryptography, the hash key that we hear so much about in blockchain. Malta is considered a virtual safe haven for many reasons, such as blockchain, such as iGaming. We're creating an ecosystem that is ripe to take advantage of a state that embraces technology, that embraces digital economy. And we're also doing it very recently, at least trying to tap into the esports, which would, of course, just like iGaming and blockchain, give Malta a platform to have millions of people using our services, using our country, using our platform without adding resource burdens that the island cannot sustain. Moving towards a digital Europe, which would allow for the single market not just to be a physical commerce market, but also to be a virtual e-commerce market is coming to fruition in the next 7 years. Lots of money is being pumped into SMEs to build digital infrastructure to allow for the digital single market to actually exist. E-residency is very famous in Estonia. I've spoken about this many times before. They're giving people e-visas to be able to use the government e-services, the e-government services, even if you are not a citizen of the country, even if you are not a physical resident of the country. Why is that good? Well, it gives revenue generation in many cases. It also attracts business into the country to interact with the different firms of the country. But one such example of revenue generation, I have attached a reference here to a website that I have used myself personally. In half an hour, you can set up a British company through the internet with a proxy address. It's completely legal, and you can use this company to set up a Stripe account that is not available for Maltese companies. And you can use a Stripe account to do very complex payment processing for e-commerce websites, something that's direly needed for Maltese entrepreneurs to go global and even to do business properly through the internet. A couple of videos here, you can check them out. Very, very cool. Elon Musk, awesome dude, is making some amazing projects. One of them is the Starlink. Starlink is basically going to have thousands of satellites crisscrossing the earth, sending internet to each other and down to the earth. And some people have described this as a way that internet censorship can be fought. Of course, if you have a Western company controlling the infrastructure for the internet, such as Starlink, it's going to be very difficult for countries like China to moderate what their citizens are now accessing. So let's hope it goes in that direction, or at least wish. Blockchain for digital governments, quite technical things here, but the main gist is that blockchain can be the foundation for digital governments to actually improve their operations, reduce bureaucracy and corruption, because digital ledgers are immutable and programmed smart contracts would not allow them to be broken. As well as being very transparent through the data logging. Of course, you would know who is putting in the data, and there would be no way of hiding it in theory. As well, as mentioned before, it's decentralized, so you would not have any problems with DDoS attacks. Other than this, of course, at least in my opinion, censorship is not something that can be stopped. Censorship is always going to have some ways that can be overcome. One very interesting approach that I was very surprised to come across is by Reporters Without Borders. They've created this library inside Minecraft. Minecraft is a game that allows you to enter a virtual world and build anything you wish. Inside this Minecraft world, the Reporters Without Borders have placed all kinds of books that contained censored information, censored blog posts, censored articles, censored books that have been banned by authoritarian countries all over the world. Malta is on the list of books. You know, you've got Daphne Caruana's blogs over there, her books also, but also the Egyptian books there as well, and Chinese books as well. I wondered, like, can't the server be blocked? Like, can't the IP of the server be blocked by the government, by the ISP, the Internet Service Provider? Well, yes, the IP can be blocked, but of course, anyone can put up a new URL address, so they could pop up from anywhere at any time, and the file is even available offline on a pen drive that you can just plug in or send direct to your peer with WeTransfer, over Facebook, over email, easy. So it's impossible to stop the flow of Minecraft. It already exists all over the world. It's already distributed over the world. It's available for free and also paid. It's a very interesting game. It's a very interesting medium as well for censorship, because it's targeting young people who are actually using the game, are probably more interested in accessing an uncensored library. So that's quite interesting in itself, because it's empowering youth. It's putting this kind of information not as a press release or as some boring document, but as a game that they're already playing with their friends. An interesting project we did recently with ESN Malta was to tackle social isolation using Minecraft as well as a virtual world. Students from all over Europe, they found themselves on lockdown in their bedrooms, no access to the outside world. So ESN is present in over 50 countries. It's spread across 550 universities. On this Minecraft world, we have 200 users who are building and collaborating and exchanging in materials and goods in this virtual world. And that is quite an interesting thing when you think about it. Of course, the opportunity was just perfect timing for it to be launched whilst whilst everyone across Europe is locked in lockdown. And it also falls in line with positioning Malta as an esports destination. We hope to use the data being collected in this Minecraft world about the users in the network to obtain some kind of new partnerships for the network, and maybe even take it further and create new opportunities for esports. Over here, some interesting things that I came across. An important factor that I spoke about in the very beginning was that national crisis accelerates state control. We're in crisis at the moment. The world is in crisis. Different countries react in different ways. One way that Taiwan reacted was very swiftly to merge databases and information about their citizens, which is very Big Brother-like, but it's being done in an emergency for them to accurately know where their citizens are at risk of having been sick or not. One way you can put it is like this: if a citizen from Taiwan went to the pharmacy and they asked for cold medicine, the pharmacist would have access to their travel history as well. So if they were in Wuhan over the past month and they have some flu symptoms, then the pharmacist would immediately know that this person is a high-risk patient for coronavirus, and it is very advisable for them to get tested. It was very interesting to see that one way to prevent DDoS attacks is through quarantining the infected computers. This would need international organizations such as NIS, but not NIS, just with the same structure as the Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions, to have access and control over the ISP to be able to shut down computers that are identified as being infected. It would have to be a neutral organization with the same kind of values of responsibility, transparency, and trust. And as mentioned previously, we need to simulate biological uniqueness inside of our computers. The distributed nature of blockchain is an essential nature that makes it impervious to DDoS and hacking. However, actually, the cryptographic hash function is not unique to the blockchain. The technology that is managed, the open source software Xroad, was developed in response to the Russian DDoS attacks of the early 2000s and uses cryptographic hash functions, but is not a blockchain technology. So just to finish off, I'll read my conclusion. In Chapter 3 of the New Digital Age, we examine a number of areas that autocratic governments are exploiting: the abuse of personal data and the internet censorship facilitated by Chinese firms, amongst others. However, well, you can read that if you like. To conclude, I thought that this was a very interesting exercise to go through this book step by step and as mentioned in the beginning, there's numerous examples of how the future of states is actually being created now during this disruption. I always like to quote Schumpeter, and times like these, where we talk about creative destruction, the world is going through huge disruption. We're seeing disentangling of our society, and this is going to be the foundation of building the future of our states, future of ourselves, and hopefully it will be a better one. Bonus slide over here, President von der Leyen. She talks about a very interesting thing that immediately ticked some boxes about what we've been talking about, what we've been studying over here. President von der Leyen warns against any foreign investment coming into the EU at this delicate time that is being done not to boost the economy, not for the betterment of our economy. The investment could be being done by countries such as China, such as Russia, in order to take control of our infrastructure, in order to have more control over Western society in almost an expansionist, almost an imperialistic manner. It's quite a scary notion to think about it, that this is something we have on theory and is happening here before us. I hope the governments of our countries do not give in to these kind of investments, and we maintain a strong sovereign economy for Europe. Thank you. I apologize again for the delay in my submission, and I look forward to seeing you later at our online lectures.